Yeah. Can someone close the door in the back as you pass it? Thank you so much. Just in case we get noise out there in a little bit. All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is good to see you all here at the end of our second week of the quarter. So our graded in-class activity is going to be on Canvas today. So this is something that Dr. Yukelcoach will introduce in her half of the lecture today. Also today, I wanted to point out we're finishing our introductory unit. So we've already talked a little bit about the geography and environment of the Middle East and Horn of Africa. We've problematized the term and the concept Middle East with Dr. Fani. Last time we heard kind of the story of the Middle East up to 1960. And today I'm going to talk to you a bit about language, power, identity in the Middle East. And then the second half of class, Dr. Yukelcoach is going to come and talk about a very interesting way to get at a different side of history through oral history projects. So what do you guys think? What are some countries? Just to make sure we're remembering. I promise I'll stop asking you eventually. What are some countries that would be here? Someone yell one out for me. Syria. Syria. What's another? Turkey. Iran. Saudi Arabia. Lebanon. Jordan. Iraq. Egypt. Palestine. Lebanon. There are probably some more, but Kuwait, yeah. I don't remember which one we've said. So we're getting this, right? We're knowing what's on this map. I remember in my K-12 years, it was very difficult to find any history book or any book aside from my sixth grade geography textbook that even talked about what countries were over here. So it's good to get this in our brains. So last time we kind of got the story of the Middle East up to let's try half. Learned about the story of the Middle East up to 1960. So tell your neighbor what you remember. What are people tending to fight about? What major religions arose in this region? And what are some major themes that you remember or things that you remember from our discussion of the history? Tell your neighbor something you remember. Okay, let's see what we think. What's something people tend to fight about? Yeah.
Resources like water and trade.
Yeah, resources like water, trade routes. Eventually, they start fighting about some other stuff. What do they eventually start fighting about? Religion comes into the picture. Often they're like saying they're fighting about religion and may or may not actually be fighting about religion, but sometimes they genuinely are fighting about religion. Anything else that you think they eventually start fighting about? They do. So oil definitely becomes a big deal, like those resources. Yes. Land eventually becomes a thing. Territory eventually becomes a thing. But through a lot of history, people really just care specifically about where are the resources, where's the money, and they don't really care. Like if you're not an area that produces nice resources or a lot of money, they're like, we'll go through and make you pay us taxes every so often. Otherwise, we don't care. What are some major religions that arose in this region? Yes. Yes, all three Abrahamic religions. So Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Any other ones? Zoroastrianism. Yes, that's a big one that turned up. What's something you remember about the ancient Middle East? Yeah.
Polytheism.
Polytheism, yes, it was very normal. Everybody has lots of different gods, unless you live in Judah and hold to the religion of the Hebrew Bible. Other than that, you got lots of gods going on. Absolutely. What's something someone remembers about the Greco-Roman periods? Yeah.
Rulership was based in Greece and local rulers in the Middle East on like ancestry as justification for their local rule.
Yes. So during the Greco-Roman periods, either the region was being ruled by people within the Roman Empire or a Hellenistic Empire based in Greece or Rome, or they're ruled by people who say identify as our ancestors were from Greece or Rome. Yes.
Also, like after Alexander the Great died, like his heir was too young to like assume his position. So like Alexander the Great's like generals and other officials like kind of took over certain areas.
Yes. So after Alex dies, his generals divide up his empire. And so you end up with all these different empires. Eventually, some of them swallow up the others, but you end up with these dynasties of people who are like, I'm a Greek person, but they've been a king there for like hundreds of years. Their family has been kings there for hundreds of years. What's something you remember about the period from the late Roman era to the Crusades? What's the big change? What's the big move? Yeah, Sasha.
With like Christianity kind of taking over too, like with the Crusades, Europeans started to infiltrate as well in the Eastern regions. So then it became like this whole issue of like which religion was kind of gonna take over, and a lot of the Romans or the Roman Empire like despised the Christian.
Yeah, so in this period, we see at the beginning of the period, kind of kicking it off, we have Constantine and his conversion question mark to Christianity, and how he takes the whole Roman Empire, he makes Christianity their official religion, and this doesn't necessarily stick for a while, but eventually it does. And so during this period, we see the Byzantine Empire, whose official religion is Eastern Orthodox Christianity. We see that in the Middle East. And we see also later in the period, as you're pointing out, the Europeans start getting more involved in the region. They'd always been kind of interested in the region because Jerusalem, but now they're much more getting involved, and we have the Crusader kingdoms at the end of this period. What's something someone remembers about this kind of somewhat later Islamic period when it's mostly different Islamic powers in the region? What's something someone remembers? Yes.
We noticed that there was a lot of like cultural transfer and exchange as the region became more interconnected in different empires.
Yes, we heard about how they're now more connected with farther to the east in Asia. We had the Mongols come through, and so there's even more connection with wider parts of the world, as well as with continuing connections into Europe, into other parts of Africa. Yes. So during this period, we have a lot of different Islamic powers, and they don't necessarily get along. So some of them are going for Sunni Islam, some for Shia, some are doing something else. And they continue to go on because nations always have conflicts with other nations, regardless of what their religious beliefs are. How about the modern period? What's something you remember about what was going on in the more kind of in the 1800s and 1900s? Yes, Caleb.
Orientalism. Their Western nations had this concept, mostly driven by the desire for resources that the East could not take care of itself and needed the guidance of extreme civilization West.
Yes. So the people in the West are like, we want the resources over there. And so we're going to justify going over there with our colonial power and basically taking over and taking what we want because, oh, these people, they're uncivilized and uneducated and they need us to look after them. And you're just like, did you like some of these people seem to have seriously believed this? And it's just like, what is going on in your brain? But yes, absolutely. Right around 1960, what's happening in the Middle East? Yeah.
The Allies, World War II, are carving it up into arbitrary oil grabbing alliance.
Yes. So in the early 1900s, we saw the UK, France, Italy, Russia. Those are kind of the primary powers involved in this, kind of dividing up the Middle East as to who was going to control it. And then right around 1960, they're starting to we're starting to see that these nations are getting independence, but how independent are they really at the beginning? We looked at the example of Egypt, and it was pretty clear that it's independence until we want to do something there, right? Like until people in the West want to do something there. And so yes. Okay. So we kind of remember our story, right? Story of the Middle East. Okay, let's talk about language identity and power a little bit. Let's start here. What languages of the Middle East can you guys name? Raise your hand. Yeah. Persian.
Arabic.
Arabic. Farsi, yes. This would be like a form of Persian, but you can either think of it as a separate form or it's complicated. Yes. Turkish.
Syrian?
Yes, Assyrian. Yes.
Kurdish.
Kurdish, yes. Absolutely. Yes.
Sumerian?
So yes, that would be a language of the ancient Middle East, yeah. It died out by so it survived in writing until probably the mid first millennium BCE, but it had already died in spoken form probably before the mid second millennium BCE. Yes.
I heard there's a language like called Nawati or something like that. In Oman, it's like a tribe. They have their own language.
Oh, yeah, cool. Yes, there are a lot of local languages that people don't even know about. So yes, there are a lot of important local languages. Yes.
Azeri Turkish.
Yes, Azeri, a Turkic language. Absolutely, yes.
Armenian.
Armenian, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Hebrew.
Hebrew, yes, good. Any others? That's a pretty good list. We got a pretty good list going there. So the Middle East and Horn of Africa are very, very linguistically diverse, and they've been linguistically diverse for thousands of years. Here's a little map just showing you some of the diversity in the ancient Middle East. What I've done is I've color coded the languages by what language family they belong to. So we've got different Afro-Asiatic languages. The blue are all Semitic languages. Well, this one shouldn't be blue. I don't know why that's blue. This is an isolate. It's its own language family. The yellow are early Persian languages. The red are Hurrian languages. The white are Indo-European languages, like English, that have made it into the region. So there's already a lot of linguistic diversity. And what I want to say here is this is only a picture showing you languages that were written. There were many other languages in the ancient Middle East that were not written, and that we only have references to the fact that different people had their own languages, and they didn't write anything in that language. So already very diverse. Here's a picture from modern day. I realize you can't read that really at all. What I want you to see is all the different pretty colors. Every different color is a different language. So you can see that certain languages are very widespread, like the language in yellow. I think that's Arabic. Yep, that's Arabic. That one's very widespread. The sort of dark orange color, that's all the different varieties of Persian, Farsi, and my brain is blanking, Dari and Luri and all those varieties of Persian. The green is Turkish. The sort of dark green is Turkish. So you can see there are a lot of different languages. A lot of different languages in the modern Middle East. And there's more that are local languages that didn't even make it onto the map. So just to kind of give you an idea, today in the Middle East and Horn of Africa, there are many different even language families that are represented, different language families. So in the Afro-Asiatic superfamily, we have the Semitic language family, which is probably the most commonly spoken through a lot of the Middle East. So this would include languages like Arabic, Hebrew, Amharic, and many more. We also have Cushitic languages as part of Afro-Asiatic, like Oromo and Somali, and others. The Indo-European language family is also represented. So the Persian family is part of this, Kurdish languages, and many others. They're including Armenian. There's also the Turkic language family, including Turkish, Azeri, and many others, as well as other language families which are less attested in the region, still attested, but somewhat less frequent. The Caucasic languages like Georgian and Circassian, and the Nubian language, the Barakli language, which is from the Dravidian family, which is going with India. So basically, what should you get from this? There's incredible linguistic diversity. People are speaking all kinds of different languages. I go on archaeological digs in the Middle East, and generally speaking, the people who live in the area where I dig, they're speaking all kinds of different languages. In order to dig in the area where I usually dig, you kind of need to know at least 3 different languages to make sure that you can talk to everybody. So it's like an incredibly linguistically diverse place, and it's very fun. And it's very different from the United States, where everybody knows English, pretty much. Some people know Spanish, and then like there are pockets where other languages are common, right? But like it's a very kind of monolingual society. It's based around the idea that people are going to be monolingual in English. So it's a very different experience and a very different situation. If you ever want to find information about any of these languages, here are a couple of quick links that you can use. The World Atlas of Language Structure Online, Ethnologue, These are good places to get started. Now, if we're thinking about language, people use language differently in different situations, and different people within a culture sometimes use language differently. So what do you guys think? I've given you a list here of some different aspects of identity, some different types of things that can be important to someone's identity. Which of these aspects of identity do you think can impact the way you use language? And which aspects of identity do you think we can purposefully signal using language? Tell your neighbor what you think.
Yeah, very similar.
Okay, what do you guys think? If we're thinking about religion, gender, age, occupation, ethnicity, nation, class, political affiliation, region, education, family affiliation, ideology, let's do it this way. Are there any of these that you don't think can impact language use? Dead silence. That's what I want to hear. You're absolutely right. Every single one of these things can impact how we use language. Now, what do you guys think? What are some examples of how we could signal some of these things using language? Yeah, Kilo.
Just the use of Coptic in any capacity. I mean, it's not spoken by anything outside of really the church service of the Coptic church. So, I mean, that's kind of a religious signifier.
Okay, so if you're familiar with Coptic, it's probably in a religious context. And so if you're using that, you're signaling something about yourself. Yeah?
Accents can signal.
Yes. So different accents and dialects can signal your home region. Yeah?
For many places in the Middle East, I mean, your use of like language or words from one language or another can signal not only your ethnicity, but also your political views on things like separatism or preservation of language and culture. So, there's a lot of minority groups in these linguistically diverse countries who want to preserve their language, and so will use it as much as possible instead of the prevailing language. You see this in like Iran with Persian. You see it all over North Africa with Arabic.
Yes, absolutely. So even what language you choose to use, you're signaling perhaps your politics, you're signaling your ethnicity or culture, you're signaling a lot of things about yourself. Yes.
Like on impacts for language use, like your age and depending on who you're talking to as well, that can also influence like how you talk to them and like whether if it's an older person, like maybe you'll be more respectful. If it's like someone your age, it's a little bit more breathing.
Yes, you're bringing up a really important point. It's not just the aspects of our identities that we can signal through language use, but we also look at our audience and we're like, okay, I'm going to change my language use based on this audience also. So you can also signal what you think is appropriate in that connection. Yes.
I know in like language community language like Spanish and Arabic, there's different words you use for like female versus male. and how you like talk to them, so someone was born with an A sound in Spanish or an O sound for a man.
Okay, yes. So you're signaling things about gender as well. Absolutely. Yes.
Family affiliation as well, I know like, in Saudi Arabia, people from different tribes really pronounce words differently, kind of like the number one, pronounce it different times.
Yes, yes. So there can be things you can pronounce differently based on family affiliation as well. Yes, absolutely. So basically, you can signal any of these aspects using language. So if this is the case, if all these aspects of identity can impact your language use, if you can signal all these aspects of identity with your language use, language itself often becomes an identity marker. Makes sense, right? Now, because language is an identity marker, a culture's laws and practices relating to languages can end up being ideologically loaded and can impact the users of those languages. That also makes sense, right? So here are a couple of important terms that we need. Our first important term is language policies. Most countries have somewhere that you can find a set of language policies that they've decided on for government work. Laws about what languages can be used for what purposes in a given country. So, what languages can you give a witness statement in a court case with? What languages are official government documents going to be in? These kinds of things. Now, we also have the very interconnected issue of language rights. Language rights have to do with, does an individual have the right to use their preferred language or languages first at all? Because there have been governments throughout the history of the world that have tried to say, you're not allowed to speak that language at all anymore. Just don't do it. You'll actually be punished as a criminal if we catch you speaking this language. And sometimes, like, in what setting? So if we go back to the kind of courtroom example, if my preferred language is Somali, can I go into court and give my testimony in Somali? Will they accept that? That kind of issue. So can I use my language and in what settings? And of course, we have official language. What is an official language? It's the language that has been officially chosen by the government of a country to be used in official official context. So government writing, the court system, and also usually education. This is really important. Like things like government writing, the court system. Hey, maybe I'm a law-abiding person and I don't have a lot to do with the government. Maybe this won't affect me too much what the official language is. But if I am going to school and I have to be schooled in a particular language, that's absolutely going to have a huge impact on everybody who can go to the school, right? So, if these many aspects of identity are really entangled with one another like this, this can end up being really messy. Okay, let me see. Let me think about time management for a second. I am going to skip over something here. Okay. So imagine that you're a senator in a country. Okay, we're all senators here. We're all senators of a country. And we're trying to decide what our official language is going to be. What are some things that are going to be important? Here's some options. Is a certain language or dialect connected to your national identity? Are there certain ones that are kind of core to your national identity? You're like, we identify as the people of Blueberry, and so we want to speak the Blueberry language, right? There could be issues of literacy and education. What language has historically been used in education? So, what language do most people know how to write in? What do we have a lot of texts in that we want to be able to read? These can be important. Population size, how many people speak? How many people in your country speak different languages? That could have an impact on what official language you want to choose. The availability of people who can teach in your language or dialect. So if you decide on an official language that's now going to be used in education, there need to be people who can teach in that official language, right? Or it's not going to work out. There could be issues of religion. Some languages are deeply tied to different religions. Some languages also have issues of prestige. Some are historically seen as like the languages of the elite, which usually means that people are like, oh, yay, that language, historically speaking. So what do you guys think? Tell your neighbor, if you had a complicated situation and you were trying to pick an official language, which one of these things do you think you would want to put the most weight on? Like if these things are pushing you in different directions for choosing your language, which of these things do you think are the most important to think about? Tell your neighbor.
Yeah, I probably wasn't big enough. That kind of faded out.
Okay, what do you guys think? What did you talk about? What did you want to put more weight on? Yeah.
For myself, with the national identity, as the country, specifically the US, we're a multi-ethnic nation from many parts of the world. So establishing English as the primary language of teaching and communication, we've established ourselves as a separate identity that we can gather around.
Okay. So national identity could be a thing to sort of use one language that we pretty much all have in common, so we can kind of gather around this. Can anyone see any downside? What could be a potential downside? Any of these have potential downsides, right? What could be a potential downside of being like, I'm gonna go with the national identity one? Yeah.
That could cause, like, local havoc, because those who don't identify, they're gonna rebel.
Okay, so those who don't identify with that national identity, or those who don't have that language, are going to be in trouble. What are some other ones you guys picked? What are some other ones you guys picked? Yeah.
I think if you're looking at like a general example, I think population size is probably the most, is probably the easiest one to pick, but it's not winning by a lot. I think it's easy to say like, oh, you know, the most people speak this language, so we should make it the national language, but it doesn't take into account the possibility of there being isolated groups who speak a different language, don't have the education that they need, and who are generally harder to reach, and so who are not going to be able to communicate as well.
Okay, yes. So we could pick population size, be like, most people can speak this language. But then what are you doing for the people who don't speak this language? What is going to happen with them? They're now, you've got all these poor little 6-year-olds who are now going to school and having to jump into a completely different language. And there may or may not be support structures set up for that. What else? What are some other ones you guys thought were important? Yeah.
Well, literacy, education level, as well as the availability of teachers, both are important, because with too low, you want to make an official language of a language which few people are actually literate in. That would be pretty hard to manage. and then teaching, you don't have enough teachers, your language could just kind of fall flat or morph into too many different things.
Okay, yes. So the literacy and education and availability of teachers, these are very interconnected things. And they're very like on the practical side, like we have seen examples in history where people chose an official language based on something like population size, but it wasn't the language that had historically been the language of education. It wasn't historically a written language. And so now you have a problem. You're trying to create all these materials for people to learn how to write in this language. There's not that much for them to practice with. People are having to learn from scratch how to teach and write in this language. And it was kind of a hot mess for a couple of decades. And so, like, it's very much on the practical side rather than the ideal side. Like, idealistically, you might be like, we want to reach more people. But practically, literacy and availability of teachers are like really important. Anything on here you feel like shouldn't really be on the list is like the top things we consider? Yes.
Prestige.
Can you tell me why?
It's more like for people aesthetics, it's not important like as like a law in the country or a rule. So I think it would be.
Yeah. So prestige could be like it could just end up perpetuating a system where the elites who had all the education continue to have control over the language. They continue to have so much control over what you can do with the language. And so there's definitely a downside to that one. Yes. Okay, so we're keeping these things in mind. Let's look at a couple of real examples. First, I want to show you, this is a map showing the official state languages in the area. And you can see that as usual, we have a different, yet another definition of what the Middle East is. Here they've called it the Greater Middle East to try to get around the fact that it's a wobbly term, right? So we can see that Arabic is official language in a lot of places. We have Persian. The ones with lines, these are ones with multiple official languages. So Afghanistan, for example, has both Persian and I don't know what color it's trying to show me. Yeah, that makes sense. Pashto. And so, you know, you can see a lot of these countries only have one official language, even though we know there are many, many different languages spoken there. So one language, one sort of central language of education, one language for the court, one language for the government, but the people in these places are speaking lots and lots of different languages. Okay? So here's a scenario. Let's talk about how this works out. So in Egypt, there are about 20 different languages that are sort of local languages that are spoken. But only one language is the official language of the country. What do you guys think? What are the effects that having only one official language, what effects will we probably see in Egypt? And what have we probably seen? Tell your neighbor what you think. How's this going to affect Egypt?
Yeah, it's. That's sounds funny. Yeah. Organization. There's no. I was really glad. Yeah, let's see.
Okay, what do you guys think? What are some potential effects that having only one official language would have? I realize we don't necessarily know all the details. There's very little information to go on, but what would be your guess about what could happen? Yeah.
Prejudice, racial prejudice or sectarian violence.
Okay, so we could end up with situations of prejudice against minority groups that could be maybe perpetuated through this. Yes.
You would probably start seeing language death, or at least like functional language death outside of maybe cultural preservation groups. Because as urbanization happens and younger generations move to cities, where the official language is spoken, they stop having a reason to learn or practice their, original language. And so unless you're trying to communicate with people from older generations who maybe don't speak the new language, it's not useful at all. You have no real reason to do it.
Right. So unless there are reasons other than like using something in official context to keep a specific language and preserve a specific language, we do often see dwindling numbers of native speakers of the language. We see younger people having less and less competence in the language. And even, you're right, we even see language death when there are really no native speakers of a language left, because from a practical perspective, what you need to learn is Arabic. And so oftentimes younger people have a lot going on. They have a lot they need to learn and try to, get a job, start a family, these kinds of things. And so they're not necessarily thinking about we need to keep our heritage language. What else? What do you guys think? Yes.
It might be harder for people, like people could be excluded, like it might be harder for them to do basic things or like even go to court and stuff, but because my friend and I were talking about how like even though English is a big official language in the US, I think there's like usually like Spanish translations everywhere. So that's like an option.
Yes, so there is an option. So if countries are willing to do the work, it is possible to accommodate many additional languages. Like if you ride transit here and you look at the signs on the doors of like the light rail, they're in a lot of different languages. This is something the city of Seattle has chosen to do, but it's not something they're required to do. And I will tell you that in the place where I grew up, you would be lucky if you got Spanish as well as English. Like if you got anything other than just English, it would be unusual. And so there's a lot of variation because there's no law about it. There's a lot of variation in where people choose to put their money and their resources. Like if you want to have all your signs be in 12 languages, they're going to be bigger signs. You have to pay translators or have someone check the Google Translate at least, hopefully, you know. So it's an investment and they're not required to make that investment. So what they choose to do is going to differ, right? Any other effects you guys want to point out of this? What's going to happen to literacy rates in languages other than Arabic? Yeah, they're probably going to go down because there are fewer official uses for it. People are being educated often in Arabic to a large extent. And so people aren't necessarily learning to read and write in the other languages. They may be able to figure it out. They may be able to take a special class in that at various points in their education. but they have to take extra effort in order for that to happen. So you can imagine this is complicated. And as we saw on this map, a lot of these countries only have one official language. So you can imagine this kind of thing potentially happening across a wide variety of countries. Here's another example. In Turkey, the Arabic script used to be used to write the main official language, Turkish. For various reasons, which maybe some of our other speakers will get into later in the quarter, they decided to switch to officially using the Latin script to write their language, Turkish, instead. Okay? What do you guys think? What positive and negative effects might a choice like this have? Why might you do this? What would this do? And how will this choice affect speakers of other languages who live in Turkey? Tell your neighbor what you think. Wild speculation accepted. Okay, what do you guys think? What are some effects that this switch could have? Either positive or negative. What do you think? Not
I think it's gonna be negative. People will have to learn new language. They have to switch everything, and it's gonna take lots of time.
okay. So switching the script, they're going to have to learn to read the new script. They're going to have to switch all of their signs, all their official stuff. They're going to have to switch that. Absolutely. So this is going to be a big investment of resources required. What else? What do you guys think? Yes.
I think, we could all go on about the negative impacts of this because there are many, but I would like to list one positive. It allows Turkey to interact and interface with European countries. And this was an intentional choice on the part of Mustafa Kemal, who implemented this decision. His reform from the Ottoman Empire was to change it from being an Eastern power to being more Western. And so the Westernization included changing the script, and this allowed their language to become more integrated into the wider spectrum of European languages.
Yes. So switching to the Roman alphabet, the Latin script, which is what we use for English, it's what's used for Spanish, for French, for German. It allows them to be more integrated with European powers, European languages, and more accessible to people who are first language speakers of European languages. So it does have that positive impact. What else? What do you guys think? Caleb.
Kind of building on the opposite of what he said, it does isolate you from your neighbors though. You are choosing by switching to the Latin script to align yourself more closely with foreign powers than with your own neighbors who share the same script. And that was one commonality that kind of like allowed international cooperation on the local level.
Right. So any one of these things, you can look at the positive side, you can look at the negative side. So it also means that now it's going to be harder for people who speak Arabic or are used to the Arabic script to understand Turkish. It's going to be harder for people who know Turkish to kind of understand what's going on with Arabic, and it's going to be harder to communicate with the immediate neighbors who largely have Arabic as an official language. Yes, absolutely. What do you guys think? How might this affect speakers of other languages who live in Turkey? Yeah.
It likely makes it easier for people who speak Romance languages to learn the script.
Yeah, so people in Turkey who speak European languages, their life is now easier. People who speak Arabic, on the other hand, who live in Turkey, their life is now more difficult. They have to learn multiple scripts. And there's one other like downside I want to point out. What script were all of your previous books in all of your libraries and all your works of literature? What script were they in? Arabic script. So, do you think that they have the resources to take every single book in every single library and convert it from being an Arabic script to being in the Latin script? No, no, absolutely not. So what this means is it's a lot of things are not going to get translated into the new script. And so that means you're still going to have to learn the other script if you want to be able to read historical documents and, archival records and all kinds of things like this. Older literature may be inaccessible. You're really kind of, if you don't know the Arabic script, you're kind of dependent on whatever people have put the resources into updating into the new script. So it's a mixed blessing. It's a mixed blessing. Okay. I'll let you guys think about this one on your own. Or actually, no, let's just move on given where we are in time. So we know that language is an important identity marker around the world. We can imagine that language policies have been created for a wide variety of reasons. Some of them privilege issues of religion, some of them population size, some of them are thinking about availability of teachers and literacy. They're trying to balance all of these different issues, right? And trying to make a decision. Language policies are often positive for some identity groups within a country while they're negative for others. Pretty much any language policy you put in place is going to be unbalanced in how it affects the people in that country, right? Unless your policy is everybody can use their language all of the time for everything, and that just becomes an incredibly difficult practical problem, right? How do we provide education in 15 different languages? How do we make sure that people can do their documents in 15 different like it's an incredible amount of resources that are required. That doesn't necessarily make it a bad thing. It just means it's difficult and something not many governments want to invest in. Okay. So we've seen these kinds of things are affecting the Middle East. These issues of language, we're going to see over the course of the quarter how these are entangled with different kinds of things that happen with people's choices and the stories they tell. Some of the stories that we read will include discussions of language, and hopefully this will be something we can look back on and use to help us understand what's going on a bit more broadly. Okay, we're gonna take a little break. We're gonna have a break until 2:30, and at that point, Malike should be here to talk to us about oral histories. Feel free to come down if you have any questions about what we've talked about.
What you're finished on the spot up for the things.
Like how the lights are, or do you want the lights down, or is this okay?
Maybe a little bit down. Yes. Let's see if we can
It doesn't give us a ton of options.
Okay, I think it's good, yeah.
Let me know when you.
Yeah.
Wave at me when you're ready.
Thank you. Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Hello. My name is Melike Isalkot. I'm a professor at Middle Eastern Languages and Cultures Department. My specialty is Turkish and Advanced Studies program. I teach elementary and intermediate Turkish at UDAL, as well as culture courses if you want to learn about the Turkish culture. My research is on oral history. I am an immigrant myself from Turkey who came to the United States in 2008. And I have been collecting all histories I'm working with the immigrants. I'm working very closely with the Turkish American community here in the Takala, Turkish American Cultural Association of Washington. But it doesn't mean that I'm only interviewing people who are Turkish. It is people from Turkey. So it includes a very diverse group. So today I will talk about oral history, what oral history is, why it matters. I'm going to talk about a couple of oral history projects briefly. I just want to show you the options if you want to go and explore them. But specifically, I'm going to focus on my project, Turkey in Seattle. I'll talk about how the project started, how it is evolving. It's still an ongoing project. And if you are interested in learning more about oral history, I'm offering a course in the honors program at UTA. It's oral history immigrants from the Middle East. So my project is Turkey in Seattle. I'm working with immigrants from Turkey, but the course, we expanded it into immigrants from the Middle East. So once you take that course, you learn about oral history, and we're going to go through that and interview with an immigrant from the Middle East, and I'm archiving them. It will be archived in the Uzralo libraries. So let's get started. Oh, and at the very end, I'm going to show you a mini interview clip from my project, and you will have an in-class writing assignment. Okay. So let's get started.
Malika, just a note, it'll only record you if you're, like, you'll only hear you if you stay.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Then I will keep my notes here, maybe. Okay, all right. Yeah. Okay, thanks for letting me know. I'll just move things a little bit then. All right. You know what? This is gonna work better. Okay, all right. Is this good? So, before we start talking about the oral history, are there any second generation immigrants here in this classroom whose parents or grandparents immigrated to the US? Raise your hands. Ooh, okay, a lot. So I want you to imagine their journey. Who made the decision to leave? How did their family and friends react when they decided to come to the United States? How do they think they felt on their first day in the United States? Excitement, happiness, fear, loneliness? Did they plan to stay permanently or did circumstances change? How has their identity transformed over time? I just want you to take a couple of minutes and just write down your thoughts. Just what do you think about those questions? If you are the children of an immigrant, second generation, third generation immigrant, I just want you to think about the journey of your parents or grandparents. Okay. And I'm moving on to the second question, and this is for everyone. How do you identify yourself today? Is it important for you, again, if you are the children of immigrants, is it important for you and your family to preserve heritage, language, and culture? How do you identify yourself? Like, for example, I identify myself as a Turkish American. How do you identify yourself? And again, is it important for you and for your family to preserve your heritage, language, and culture? Okay. So let's get started. So everyone has a story. Storytelling is one of the most human things we do. It is how we share knowledge, connect with others, and give meaning to our lives. Narratives allow us to understand our collective past, celebrate individual experiences, and recognize our shared humanity. Oral history, in particular, transforms everyday storytelling into an archive of memory and experience, creating a legacy for future generations. So, what is oral history? How do we define it? Any thoughts? What is oral history? Yes, please.
Stories that our parents or our relatives tell us about like our culture and their experiences.
Great, thank you. Any other definitions? Okay. So oral history is recorded interviews that preserve historically significant memories for future use. The Oral History Association defines it as a, quote, a field of study and a method of gathering, preserving, and interpreting the voices and memories of people, communities, and participants in past events. It's about memory and living experiences. It's about listening and being heard. And it's about the past and the meanings people attach to it. So in oral history, yes, we conduct interviews, we collect memories, but it's also very important that we preserve them. So I'd like to give you a brief history of oral history in North America. So here you see some roots. Okay. The earliest projects in the US began at Columbia University in 1940s, focusing on political and cultural elites. In Europe, oral historians pushed a more radical agenda, recording the lives of ordinary people, workers, women, minorities, challenging official histories. So in the United States, it began with Ellen Nevins, who was a journalist, and it started in 1948. And again, as I said, it started with the elites. He started conducting interviews with the elites of the society, whereas compared in Europe, it started with workers, minority groups. In 1960s, oral history took root in North America as part of the rise of social history, capturing the voices of immigrants, women, and workers. Importantly, oral history is collaborative. Meaning is not out there waiting to be uncovered, but emerges through the interaction between interviewer and narrator. This is something I want you to think about. It's not only you are there asking your questions and conducting the interview, but you are also part of this process. You are guiding the interview, and yes, your narrator has the story, but meaning making is happening throughout this process. So why does it matter? I'm just going to move a little bit. Why does oral history matter? Why do you think it's important? Why should we conduct oral histories? Why should we preserve those stories of the immigrants? Yes, Rina.
Probably a lot of information in history that doesn't include stories that people can tell us.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, please.
That way later generations can track their ancestors as well.
Exactly. We can leave a legacy. Wonderful. Any other comments? Okay. So oral history democratizes history, as Mina said. It allows immigrants, minorities, women, and workers to tell their own stories. So it is important because number one, it fills gaps in historical records. It captures diverse viewpoints. It helps us understand change, and it enriches our sense of history. So briefly, I would like to talk about the oral history process. So definitely there is planning and preparation. So here you see the steps: designing questions, conducting the interview. There is post-interview processing, archiving and preservation, analysis and interpretation, sharing and dissemination, and there are ethical and legal considerations. So I want to go into the details of this a little bit. Okay. So defining the objectives, first we should determine the purpose of our oral history project, such as documenting a historical event, preserving community heritage, or capturing personal experiences for research. Then we should identify our participants. We should select individuals with first-hand knowledge or experience relevant to the project. This may include elders, activists, community members, or experts. We need to do research background. We should study the historical, social, and cultural context of the topic to prepare meaningful questions and understand the broader narrative. And lastly, we should prepare the equipment. We should ensure access to high-quality recording devices, audio or video. We should have backup tools, and we should have note-taking materials. I'll come back to this when I'm going to talk about my own project, how things evolved, and now I'm lucky I'm working with a studio. Number two is about designing questions. So we should create an interview guide. We should develop open-ended questions that encourage detailed, reflective responses, such as, can you describe what it was like to live during that time? Or how did you feel about these events as they unfolded? We should avoid leading or overly specific questions that might bias the interviewee's responses. We should be flexible. We should be prepared to adapt the questions based on the direction on the interview takes. So I always encourage my students to prepare a set of questions beforehand. I encourage them to go with a semi-structured interview, but it doesn't mean that you are going to have a list of questions and you will be reading from there. You have to be actively listening, and then you should be ready to ask probes, follow-up questions. Because remember, in oral history, your goal is to get a good story from your narrator. So you have to make sure that they understand you are there and you are interested in their stories. Okay, number three, conducting the interview. First, we should build rapport. We should begin with informal conversation to make the interviewee comfortable. What I usually do and recommend for my students is just meet with your narrator for a coffee hour. First, of course, you should send an email, an official email goes, you explain the project, you attach any documents related to the project, like consent form, copyright form, information about your project, and then meet with your narrator for a coffee hour just to chat. When you meet with the narrator, you don't want to ask so many specific questions, but it's just good for both of you to feel comfortable during the actual interview. Consent and ethics, very important topic. Definitely, we have to have consent forms and copyright forms, and you have to let your narrator know that once they sign those forms, you have the right to share the oral histories publicly. So with my project that I'll mention soon, everything goes live, everything is public, everything is archived in UW Suzalo digital collections, as well as on my Turkey in Seattle oral history website. However, I experience many cases like after you conduct the interview, sometimes they may request the recording and the transcription, and you have to send them definitely, but sometimes they watch their own recording and they may not like it, and they just ask you to remove everything, just delete it from the archive, and then you cannot share it. Even though they sign the consent forms and the copyright forms, you have to respect your narrator. Okay. Recording the session. So you should use high quality recording equipment to capture the interview. You should ensure that the setting is quiet and it is free from distractions. So when I first started this project, I was visiting my narrators in their houses, because I am part of the Turkish American community. I have these connections. I was visiting them, but you have to be careful if you are conducting the interview in someone's house. Like there shouldn't be someone in the yard doing the, making some noise, or even there shouldn't be the coffee machine working in the background. Those kind of things are very important. So you have to make sure that they understand everything beforehand. If you have a studio, you are lucky, then there are people who are doing, the recording and the microphone, technical things for you so that you can focus on the interviews. Okay. Active listening, we talk about it briefly, but you should allow the interviewee or the narrator to speak without interruption, encouraging elaboration through follow-up questions and prompts. Even though sometimes you may get prompted to ask a question while your narrator is sharing their story, just be silent, be there, active listening, but you shouldn't interrupt your narrator. And last one is documentation. While you are conducting the interview, even though, let's say you are doing the video recording, you should take notes on key themes, emotions. There could be some nonverbal cues that may not be evident in the recording, especially if you are doing the audio recording. But even though you are doing the video recording, I encourage you to take notes. Okay, post-interview processing starts with transcription. You have to transcribe the recording. Now there are so many opportunities, so many programs. AI helps us with that, like other AI and some others, that it's easier. Back in the day, I had interns who were watching the whole interview, and especially if it's in Turkish, we are still doing that. They have to watch it and just, write everything down. But now it's easier. It's easier. Review and feedback. So, as I mentioned, your narrator may ask to see the recording and the transcription. You should share the recording and the transcription if they ask. If not, I would recommend not to. Again, as I mentioned, it can go into different ways. Even though you think as an oral historian, oh, this is a great story, this is a great oral history interview, the narrator may not like how they sound, how they look, how they use their gestures and mimics. So if they request it, definitely you share them. Archiving and preservation. Remember at the beginning I said this is one of the most important thing in oral history. You are not just conducting these interviews to write an article or a book about this, or just to share it with a community or a group of people, but you are doing this because you want to archive them, you want to preserve them. So in order to do this, in my case, I'm working with a library. I have my own website, but everything is being preserved in the UW Suzalo. And if you are interested in starting an oral history project, I'm sure they will be happy to help you, so you can work with them. So identifying themes is important. You should identify themes. You should analyze the interviews for recurring themes, patterns, and insights that contribute to the broader understanding of the topic. You should compare sources, cross-reference the oral histories with other historical records to corroborate and contextualize with narratives, and you should acknowledge the subjectivity. You should recognize that oral history reflects personal memory, which may include biases and gaps. Sharing and dissemination. Oral history is public, so when you are conducting this, your narrator should know that, again, everything will be shared publicly. You should share the oral histories through publications, documentaries, museum exhibits, podcasts, or community programs. In terms of education and outreach, you should use the material to engage schools, researchers, or local communities in understanding history through personal narratives. And the last one, ethical and legal considerations. We talk about this. Informed consent is important, copyright is important, and of course, respect and sensitivity is very important. So you should handle sensitive topics or traumatic experiences with care, respecting the interviewer's boundaries. I experienced something like this with one of my narrators where she is a woman who is from the Turkish American community. She's an artist. During the interview, she got emotional. She shared, an anecdote that she felt she was being discriminated, and she started crying during the interview. And after that, she asked me to edit the interview, and I did it. It's in my archive, but I didn't share the whole interview with the UW libraries. So we have to be careful about those kind of things. Okay, let me check the time because I also want to show you the mini documentary. Okay, so we'll just move a little bit faster, but let's talk about this. Oral history, again, is not just a method of documentation. It's a means of connection, reflection, and preservation. It reminds us that history is not just about events, but about the people who live them, making their stories a vital part of our shared heritage. Okay. So here in this PowerPoint, I share some oral history projects. As I mentioned at the beginning, you can just, if you're interested in, you can just type their names and learn more about them. I'm not going to talk about them right now in class, but one of them is the VPA Federal Writers Project. This is one of the first ones here in the United States. The Stas Circle Archive, there is NPR Story Corps. It's also an oral history. And here you see Columbia University Research Office with Ellen Nevins. There is Ellis Island Oral History Project. I highly encourage you to go check this website. This is about the immigrants' oral histories. And I was inspired by this website when I was designing mine. Okay, there are some notable oral history projects in US. Again, I think we will share it with you on Canvas, so you can take a look at them. And some oral histories on immigrants. Again, there are some project names. Okay. I want to move on to Turkey in Seattle Oral History Project. Okay, before this, let me talk about it. Okay, so this project began with a very simple question. Why don't we have a Turkish American oral history here in Seattle? So me being here as a faculty at UW, and again, as being an immigrant, as being part of the Turkish American community, in 2016, I attended a workshop on immigrant oral history at Ethnic Heritage Council, and then I just decided to start this, project because I was passionate about this. In 2017, I conducted my first interview because I did some training here at UW with the history department. So once I felt like I'm ready, I conducted my first interview with a Turkish American whose name was Kemal Ölmez, who is one of the oldest members of the Turkish American community here in Washington. And guess what? The interview lasted 4 hours. And during the interview, I turned off my phone. Everybody got concerned, like, where have you been? But I got a great story from him. He was so enthusiastic to share his story, and I was basically following the rules of the being an oral historian. I have to be respectful, actively listening. But at the end of the recording, both of us were exhausted, very tired, and he shared photo albums, letters, so many things with me. I forgot to mention that, but oral history is not only conducting the interviews, but once you conduct the interview, we should also ask, are there anything you would like to share with us? Then you scan them and you create a digital library. So you put everything in there. Okay. So started with Kemal Ölmez and then it went like a snowball method. But once you decide to conduct an oral history project and you don't know anyone, I highly encourage you to connect with the cultural associations like 501c nonprofit organizations. In my case, I already knew people. So phase 1, I conducted interviews on my own for 2 years. Phase 2, I recruited a team of interns from that class, oral history honors course. So I gave them a training and then they started conducting interviews for me. And phase 3, now the project grew into a collaboration and we are creating a permanent archive. We are conducting interviews with the second generation Turkish Americans. So right now there are 70 interviews completed, archived at Suzalo Libraries. We are still working on it, as I said, and diversity is very crucial for this project. So it ensures that we represent not just one voice, but the full mosaic of the Turkish diaspora in the Pacific Northwest. Okay, I'm just checking if I'm missing anything else. So the ultimate goal is to leave a legacy, to create a digital library and that archive and preserves those voices across generations. And lastly, or you may ask, what is in it for me? Why should I do something like this? Again, I'm going back to that question, like, why does oral history matter? So oral history connects past, present, and future. It makes history personal, turning textbook accounts into lived experiences. It gives voices to communities that might otherwise to be forgotten. So as students, as researchers, as community members, you can be part of this. You might conduct interviews. You might preserve your own family stories. It doesn't have to be something big. You can just start conducting interviews with your grandparents. Or you can simply listen and reflect, recognizing the importance of narrative in shaping identity. So ultimately, oral history is about dialogue across communities, across borders, and across generations. Now, I would like to play the clip because I really want you to see the mini documentary of Turkey in Seattle. And I have this mini assignment. I just want you to make a reflection while you are watching this. Okay. So we're not doing it on canvas, we're doing it on paper. Yep. Okay, I'll wait.
The end of the line, pass the back.
We have one more to say, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm asking to the back.
No? So when he was.
So whatever she says.
Okay, ready? Go.
Don't have a paper. Okay. Does anyone have any spares? Who has some spares then? Okay. Grab those real quick.
I think I need your help. Cat. Or should I just do this? Oh, yeah.
Everyone good now? Okay, excellent. Right, I'm coming really good. It probably just needs to be pulled across.
Let's get
So we come out of this a second. And we're gonna move this.
Great.
And just start at the beginning.
Yes, my name is Isaac Azuz. The original name in Turkey was Azuz, but it was changed when members of the family came here to Seattle to give it more of an anglicized version. At any rate, I was born on July 14th, 1930. My parents were from Turkey, although they met here in Seattle and fell in love and got married. My father told me that he had something called wanderlust, that he wanted to visit other parts of the world. And since he already had a brother who was living and working in Seattle, he thought that was a good point to start, and he wanted to come to Seattle. Unfortunately, not, or fortunately, I'm not sure, he got married and started having children, and that put an end to his traveling aspirations until much later, that he wanted to go back to visit Turkey.
I've been in the United States since 1997. I was born in Istanbul, I grew up there, and I went to school there, got a degree there, got my master's degree as well, and then I got married, and the year after we got married in 97, we moved to the United States. We lived in Michigan for about 5 years, and I'm 4 years in New Jersey, and since then, for the past 13 years or so, we've been here in Seattle area. My wife is from the United States. We did meet over there in '94. She was living in Turkey and she was teaching English. So we met and we started dating and we got married in Turkey. And we lived there for about a year. It was an emotional departure because like when we went to the airport and our entourage, I think there were like 18 or 20 people who came to see us off. And that was hard, it's not just like, saying, hey, goodbye, and, it's like when you're saying goodbye to 20 people, turn around and go. That was super hard.
I was born in Ayvalık, Turkey, which is on the Aegean coast. I lived there, my family is still there. I lived there through elementary school and then I went to Istanbul. And then to Boğaziçi University. And then I came to the United States for graduate school. I wanted to be in a profession that actually has concrete impact on the world, on life, on people. So I got another undergraduate in psychology, and then I got my doctorate in psychology. My parents are deceased now, but I come from an olive farming family for, as far as we know, the records go back 8 or 9 generations. 3 of my grandparents, 2 grandfathers, and my paternal grandmother are from the island of Lesbos.
I was born in Turkey, Ardeşen, a small town near Black Sea, eastern Black Sea coast, near current Georgia. Because of my parents' work, I traveled around Turkey during my childhood. I went to college in Ankara. After that, I got a school, fellowship from Turkey and came to the United States to pursue my graduate school. I did my master's and later on my PhD at Purdue University in Vienna. Came to the US in 1994. After my PhD, I started a position in California. That was my first job out of academia. I worked in NASA Jet Propulsion Labs. After NASA Jet Propulsion Labs, I went to University of Texas. I changed my career. I became an academic. I spent about 3.5 years there. At that time, I was recruited by University of Washington. But if you ask me where I'm from, I would say Ardeşen. It's an interesting place. There's a unique culture. I identify with it more than anything else.
I was born in Erzurum, Turkey, which is on the eastern part of Turkey. I spent all my childhood until college in Erzurum, and then I went to Ankara for medical school. Then I got married to my husband, and I came to US in 1996. Well, it's interesting, neither of my parents are from Erzurum. My mom is from Kars, Sarıkamış, and she is Caucasian, Cherkess. And my father is from Manisa, which is on the Aegean coast of Turkey, and he came for his military work to Erzurum and met my mother. I think I have that kind of, culture from the Cherkess route and the Aegean route, but also grew up there. I think it's kind of more like a mixture. I mean, I know my husband, Osman, since elementary school. We've been in the same school, we went to same middle school. And we were really good friends for a long time. And, he went to a different college. I went to medical school. We were both in Ankara. After he graduated, he decided to come to US. He got some scholarship from the government. And he started working here and studying in Philadelphia. And then one day he called me, and I was in my last year of my medical school, and he said, Nane, I've always been thinking about you, what are you going to do this summer? Are you going to be in Erzurum? So that summer, we started dating and we got married that winter. And that's how I came to US. So it was very unexpected, just started with one phone call and, and I found myself in Twitter. I had not been to the United States, so I didn't know what to expect. I was very focused on, I'm going to get this thing and go back to Turkey. Life turned out to be quite different. It is for all of us, I guess. What shocked me was the unfamiliarity of life in the United States. Again, I was fortunate because I came to UCLA and there were about 6 or 7 Turkish friends. Some of them I know and some of them I met. So I felt very welcomed by the Turkish community in first Los Angeles and then in San Francisco. But I remember going to a grocery store when I first came in and seeing rows and rows and rows and rows of bread and thinking, what do I buy? I mean, as I said, the familiarity was not there. Like I could not be on automatic. So it was very tiring at the beginning. I felt completely like fish out of water.
It was very different, because when you're outside of the US, your view of the US is pretty much like, it's heavily influenced by what you're seeing in movies or TV shows or what you're reading in newspapers. When we started living in the US, one thing that was really interesting, shocking revelation was how conservative and religious the United States was to the country. Like, in those years, it was actually coming from Turkey. It was a very amazing realization that I'm supposed to be in this bastion of civilization. I know everybody is sort of religious and conservative. I didn't come here just to study and leave. I didn't plan to stay long either. My mindset was, I'll explore and I'll try to understand what the US is all about. Since I arrived in Indiana, my impressions were about Indiana. Okay, Indiana, people are very nice. They are not people you can establish very close relationships. They are pretty guarded, but they are nice. They are very helpful when you ask help. They help. But again, Indiana was also surprisingly very quiet, almost boring. Coming from Turkey, I was shocked because your image of United States is what you see in the movies. Typically, where they show is big cities, like New York, Los Angeles. You think that's the US, but it's not. Most of the US is very rural. Indiana is very rural too. Honestly, I've never thought about being in America. Never. I mean, I had a lot of friends in medical school. They were already making their plans to come to do their residency and the rest of their training in the United States. I never thought about it. I thought about maybe coming to research. So for me, America was, I had no idea about how America would look like. Everybody seemed fine, nobody, looked like unhappy. But
I felt like people were so away from each other. And people were nice, they were saying hi, and like when they see you in the store or stuff, like in the street, but still very, very distant. People were very distant from each other. So that's why we get together with more like a Turkish community in that area. And the extreme homesickness, I remember. As I said, I have a twin sister with whom I'm very close. And she got married 6 months after me. I got married in June, came 2 weeks after I got married, I came to Los Angeles. My sister got married the following December. So we did not have enough money to buy a ticket to fly back to Turkey for my sister's wedding and fly back. So I wasn't there for her wedding. And the nostalgia and sadness and yearning I felt was just horrendous, horrendous. So I remember the night she got married, we had a porch on the top of the apartment building where I was living. I sort of lay down and looked at the stars and I thought, these are the stars that my family is looking at. It's the same stars that my family is looking at while they're celebrating my sister's wedding. So it was a tough time. And I think the thing that really saved me, I didn't mean saving, but that made it a lot more bearable, was friendships were amazing. And my determination.
I finished my PhD and then I graduated. Towards then it was very stressful. I had to find a job. And this was like right after 9/11. Right after 9/11. Unfortunately, as an immigrant, your chances dropped down significantly. It's not all because of the change in regulations. Some of it is change in regulations. People start asking whether people have green cards or citizenship and so on. That eliminates some chances. And also, coming from a certain part of the world, some people might have had some prejudices. Suddenly, also job market tanked. So everything came together and, it wasn't a good time for anybody to look for a job. But then I got this job that it's like almost like a dream job. I suddenly, from almost nothing, I went to this dream job. And I still, these days, I don't know why I got that job. But I'm glad that I did.
I said, hey, I gotta get a job. I can't sponge off my mother and father. So the best place to look for a job was with Boeing. I went to Boeing and I got a job almost immediately. They put me in to what is called a tool room supervisor, and I'll never forget the way he treated me there. In fact, after a few months, it really got so bad, he had me doing the dusting and the mopping inside the tool room, things that they wouldn't give to other people to do, he gave to me to do. The slightest excuse to do something to me, he would do it. He knew that I was Jewish because I didn't hide it. I said, I can't work on Saturdays because I'm a Jew, and I can't work Friday nights because I'm a Jew, but I'll work any other time you want me to work for you. So he knew I was Jewish and that I followed the Jewish religion. That's the only time I ever felt discriminated against.
9/11 happened, and I needed visa, and I needed a J1 visa to be able to get into residency. Previously, when we were in Philadelphia, I was J2, which I was able to work, but this time I needed either green card or I needed somebody to give me, provide me visa or like give me J1 visa. So the programs in this area were very, very competitive. So even though from the observation that I did at Valley, they were like very strict and we would like to get you, but we can't, like all these terrorists who kind of bombed those, the buildings and crashed the planes. They had actually, some of them have J1. So J1 visa restrictions were very, very strict at that time. So I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So instead of applying just in this area, I sent my applications all over the United States this time. And I got accepted from New Orleans. And now I was going to be another part of the United States, which is New Orleans. And I didn't know anybody there. I met with my program director, residency director. Of course, I made some friends, but it was very challenging for me. I was just by myself for a year, knowing nobody, It's very nice. It was actually a great experience for me, just being by myself in a very far away place. It was hard, but honestly, the hardest part was just being away from my daughter and my husband. And then, things happened, I applied again, and there was an open position in Olympia. It's Providence Hospital, but that meant that we had to move to Olympia. Wow. Because I have to be close to the hospital, and then Osman was driving every single day from Olympia to Bellevue for his work. He did it for 2 years. So it was very hard, but it paid off. Then I finished the residency, and then I did into fellowship, OB fellowship at Swedish hospitals. I've changed a lot as a Turkish, I would say. I mean, I'm not the same Narinur when I first came to America.
I guess it's the realization that I'm no longer there. I really truly belong somewhere else. And I think that at that moment we really kind of dawned on that that's what's happening. So I just absolutely love the people here. When we moved to American community here in the Seattle area. I think that we're really lucky about that. So when
Okay, so I'm gonna link this on Canvas in case you want to watch the rest of it. But I think we've misplaced Malike. But oh, you're there. Hi. Is there anything you want to say about what you're wanting them to include here in the last 5 minutes?
I have been sick and lost my voice, that's why I have to run to the restaurant.
Yes, understood.
There are some prompts there, so I just want them to make a reflection, just think about, what they thought about this new document and those people's immigration stories.
Okay. So if you guys are thinking about how long this is like 2 good paragraphs is about the length that you're moving forward with that. So take our last few minutes and you can organize your thoughts and finish writing what you want to write there.
If you have any questions about work history, feel free to send me an email. Okay, you can come to my office hours and we can talk about school work.
If you haven't picked up your handout from last time, please check your handouts.
Or you can like, okay, well, look at this. You're gonna be a step in here, doesn't it?